Hello, everyone. Well, it's a crazy time in the world. It's the end of October. I'm broadcasting to you from Israel. So I'm here in Jerusalem, relatively less rockets than a lot of the rest of the country. But we're in the middle of an outbreak of anti-Semitism. Um, so I like to think of racism as more like fat. Racism is something that if you're not careful about what you eat, if you don't exercise, uh, you'll get fat. If you are not careful about what media you take in, how you take it in, if you just sort of inhale what's naturally coming to you from the culture and you don't make an effort to get to know people who are different from you, you'll develop prejudices. Racism is one of the easiest prejudices to develop in most of Western culture. It's gotten harder to develop that prejudice, I think. I think there's an awful lot less racism than when I was a little kid, I think. Um, but I think it still exists. And, if you're not careful, you'll get fatter. If you're not careful, you'll gradually develop some racist or other sort of standard group prejudices. Anti-Semitism is a little different. Anti-Semitism seems to be something that people have a default, like deeply wired set of ideas about who Jews are in most of the world, like even places like Dagestan, which just came up in the news the last couple of days. There's a tiny amount of Jews who've lived in there or near there the course of history, but it's certainly not a central place to our identity and history. And yet there's massive mobs of people searching for Jews and probably trying to kill them at the airport there in Dagestan in Russia. So what is this anti-Semitism thing? It seems like there's an awful lot of people who, on a good day, in a good time in society, they might harbor some sort of vague ideas, confusions, suspicions about who Jews are, projections. But those don't really do much. They don't really become active. They don't really hurt us. It's like just, people feel a tingle every once in a while, but they don't act on it. Jews are allowed to exist in most cultures and even flourish. And I think that the healthier a society is, the better it is for Jews. We're a very diverse group of people, but we tend to thrive when given the opportunity. And when society is healthy, when there's a stability of economies, of harvests, of trustworthy institutions, of sort of predictable and well understood ways that people can live out their life cycle, successfully, that they have a clear path ahead of them, that if they grow up and they do the right things or they work hard, they'll be able to have a family, look at a better future. So that's when things are healthy, there's very little anti-Semitism. But when the resistance lowers, when you get less healthy as a society, you get more and more chances of an outbreak of anti-Semitism. So that goes from being a tingle to a whole bunch of big sores. Unlike most diseases, it doesn't so much affect the people who come up with the anti-Semitism as it results in killing Jews. So there's been this festering sore of Jews' relationship with a subset of the Palestinians. Most of the rest of the Arabs we have peace with now, and their attitudes are becoming dramatically more positively inclined towards Israel and towards Jews. You see that in the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kosovo, Morocco, all these new peace treaties that we have. It's really amazing with Arabs, with Muslim countries. But in the Palestinian subculture, some of them are becoming much more positively engaged with Jews and with Israel. Arab Israelis are probably the most pro-Israel they've ever been at this moment, which a lot of people don't know. But in Gaza, a really nasty form of anti-Semitism took hold. You could say it's mainly about jihad, or you could say it's actually mainly about hating Jews. I'm not sure it's a distinction with a difference at the moment. I'm not sure it matters. But I think that something about Gaza um, allowed conditions for, a sort of terror mentality to thrive, a jihad mentality to thrive, an extremist religious fundamentalist mentality to thrive. And then when Hamas invaded Israel, killed close to 1,500 people, murdered, raped, burned, and took hostages. In a healthier world, I think you'd have a much more straightforward reaction that would just simply condemn this and say, wow, these terrorist murder rapists, like a giant group of psychopathic serial killers, you need to go kill them. But instead, what happened is we seem to have an outbreak of anti-Semitism around the world. Sometimes it's using the dressings of anti-colonialism, claiming that somehow Israel is a colonial state. I don't know what that has to do with murdering and raping and burning and babies. I don't know. If that's decolonization, then everyone needs to rethink their morals. They say it's because it's capitalism. Israel's richer than a lot of the Palestinian territories. Again, these seem like excuses for me. I think it's just an outbreak of anti-Semitism. I think there's a fundamental distrust in the world right now, especially since COVID. Distrust of institutions, distrust of the messages and the structures of society being used accurately for the interests of the people of the world. And that breakdown in trust leads to, when something happens, suddenly people hate Jews an awful lot. You're seeing that also with college students. You're seeing it with Muslims living in places like England, Spain, Italy, Germany. The Muslim immigrant groups to those countries are not succeeding the way, let's say, Chinese immigrants to those countries are. So maybe there's a perception, maybe this is also related to the way that the economics of the world have changed and are more unstable, that there's not really a clear path to, like, hey, if I work hard, I can build a good life for myself. So there's a lot of resentment building up. And when resentment builds up without there being a clearly understood way that you can better your life, there's an outbreak of anti-Semitism. So, I mean, we could go into a million things about what anti-Semitism actually is. There's different kinds of projection, accusing Jews of genocide on the day that Hamas is committing a genocidal act against Israel is sort of creative. But that's how anti-Semitism is very often manifest. It's like a lot of projection. It's like projecting whatever you secretly want to do yourself, or whatever your worst impulses are, you project it onto the Jews. So you're somehow claiming that we're doing the thing that you're wanting to do or actually doing. The projection thing is very strange, because if Jews are doing genocide, we're doing a terrible job of it. The Palestinian population only goes up in all the places where Palestinians live in large numbers, which is Israel. There's close to 2 million. The West Bank's a little over 2 million. Gaza, there's somewhere close to 2 million. I don't know if I trust any numbers that come out of that place. But the last I checked seriously, Gaza was the same exact size and population of the city of Philadelphia. They claim that it's got a bigger population now. I'm not sure if I believe that, but let's say it's at least 1.5 million, maybe close to 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Another 3, 4, 5 million Palestinians live mostly as refugees with second or third class status in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, smaller numbers further away. In Jordan, they allegedly have a sort of second class citizenship, but they certainly don't get to choose who the king is. So there's a lot of Palestinian populations in the world, and some of them are possessed with Jew hatred. And the distinction there is, Israel has been locked in different kinds of enmity with some parts of our neighbors for, 100 years basically since Zionism really got going, since reconquest, resettlement of the land started in the 1920s. Um, but Jews don't wake up in the morning thinking about the Arabs. We don't think about hating them. We don't think about what we want to do. We mostly want to live in peace. There's been really interesting polls throughout all the different peace processes that a vast majority of Jews would agree to peace, a two-state solution, if it meant peace. In the same polls, vast majorities of Israeli Jews would agree to transfer all the Arabs somewhere far away if it would mean peace. Turns out the most important part of those surveys is if it would mean peace. Most Jews would, as we say, stand on our heads and spit wooden nickels if it would mean peace. It really doesn't matter to us in a certain sense, as long as we get to stay here and live in peace with our neighbors. But Palestinians, a subset of them, I should say, because plenty of them get along with us quite well, but a significant minority of them get up in the morning so determined to hate or kill Jews that they're willing to sacrifice their own people's well-being. I don't think that you could look at any of their... I hold them accountable to their actual words and actions. I think it's a form of racism to just sort of say, oh, well, they're oppressed, so everything they do is okay, and you can't expect them to act, blah, blah, blah. I don't buy that. Jews have been tremendously oppressed, and we're still accountable. And there was never a point in hundreds of years of terrible pogroms and then the Holocaust where Jews went on murderous rampages of rape and burning babies against Russians, against Cossacks, against Ukrainians, against Germans. We never did that. We never took revenge. Just not a thing. Same thing with like American Indians, never took revenge against the American colonists in anything that resembled what Hamas just did. It's like it's not an excuse. No matter how oppressed you are, you never get to have your behavior become savage and animalistic like this. So you got to look at that as a sort of really nasty outbreak of anti-Semitism. Anyway, so this is just sort of some food for thought. I don't think anti-Semitism can be solved, but maybe it can be, so to speak, vaccinated against, or it can be made latent. The healthier your immune system is, the less likely you are to get lots of diseases, even though you already carry them. Most people listening to this, you probably would test positive for smallpox and some other disease, well-known diseases. They're there in your system, but you have immunity to them. So unless you get really, really sick with some kind of like immune disorder like AIDS, all those diseases that are floating around your system don't do any harm. They don't break out. So I think it's kind of the same thing with anti-Semitism. I think everybody has a responsibility to make their society healthy, less corrupt, more trustworthy. Everybody should work on just speaking the truth, trying to be just simple and moral. It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to, if you're in any position of responsibility, accountability, power, you should say, I'm wrong when you're wrong. Say you're wrong. And the people who never say they're wrong, they need to be kept away from power. They need to be kept away from responsibility. That's the direction to go, is you can't trust people who think that they always know and then who say that they're never wrong. Everything else will flow from that. The society will become healthier when we can trust our institutions again, when we can trust our medical systems, when we can trust our, I don't expect to say politicians must always lie, but I have a lot more respect than I used to for let's say, monarchies. If you had to dump me somewhere right now that wasn't Israel, I'd feel actually a lot safer in Dubai or Saudi Arabia than I would in New York or Los Angeles or London right now, where there's anti-Semitic mobs rampaging. In the Arab world, there's actual law and order in the countries that have kings. Politics is not a thing that turns into giant group mass hatred. It's, you need a fundamental respect, and you need responsible leaders. And I'm not sure about the best way to do that anymore. I think if we're being honest, if we're taking accountability, then we need to say that democracy is failing or has failed in a lot of Western countries. And again, the less healthy a society is, the more likely it is to have an outbreak of anti-Semitism. And when there's big outbreaks of anti-Semitism, like in Russia in the 1880s, like in Germany in the 1930s and 40s, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, terrible outbreak of anti-Semitism, and millions of Jews get killed and carted off to death camps and pogromed and whatever. So it's happening now. And, you know, wherever you are in the world, I suspect it's going to get quite a bit worse over the next few weeks. Try to think short and long term. In the short term, stand up to it, punch a Hamazi. You know, if there's someone saying that Hamas is justified in what they're doing, you know, you should probably punch them. That's the least you can do. But in the bigger picture, try to think of how to make society healthier. Because that's, you might say, the root cause. The root cause of all disease is to have people who are unhealthy and therefore vulnerable. Eating badly, not exercising, not getting sunlight, all those things put you in an increasing state of vulnerability. If you get really obese, if you're not getting out, if you're not moving, your body gets unhealthy and you're at higher risk for every kind of disease, heart disease, everything. The more society gets unhealthy, the more risk there is for these outbreaks of scapegoating. It's not always Jews who are the victims. Sometimes these manifest as mass pogroms against whoever it is, Armenians, Chinese. Lots of people in the world have been targeted by different kinds of scapegoating pogroms. It's a symptom. It's a symptom, and the root cause is let's have a healthy society where we tell the truth.